All right, gentlemen, today have I ever got a topic for you because I know each of us as guys, whether we want to admit it or not, have been struggling with this, wow, for at least a decade now. Is it okay to even talk to women at all, let alone share that you're interested in them in some way, romantically? Or do you have to talk to women? And I'm talking about in the workplace or even out and about wherever you're going. Do you have to talk to them like there's some kind of neuter humanoid or else you're going to get taken away in handcuffs or something? My guest today, first of all, she's a woman, which is a good
Mm.
angle on this because, if it was just us dudes talking about this, how much meaning would that have vis-a-vis what women actually think? But she is also a clinical psychologist, which is very helpful, and a USA Today best-selling author of a book. You ready for this? You're going to love this title. Can I say that? Why free speech matters and how to use it fearlessly. My name is Scott McKay from X and Y Communications, and I am your host today. And you can find me on social media just about anywhere at Scott McKay, with the exception of Instagram, which is at Real Scott McKay. And I've been talking to you about this subject for ages, and now we're really going to get to the heart of it. And I talked with Dr. Chloe Carmichael, who I'm about to introduce you to at length before we click record on this. And I think you're going to really like what she has to say. Dr. Chloe Carmichael from Orlando, Florida, the free state of Florida, as you called it. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Scott. It's really good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you wrote an entire book on this. It was a bestseller. So people are really interested in this topic. It's not something that we're weird for thinking about, because I think a lot of guys can think, well, am I the only one who has a problem with this? Because I see other guys out there talking to women, yet I turn on the news and it seems like cancel culture is still a thing. Uh, Men are being considered toxic just for existing, let alone opening our mouths. What caused you to be interested in this topic in general?
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole subject, as you said, there's issues of cancel culture and toxic masculinity. And I actually did a documentary with PragerU about what we call the myth of toxic masculinity. I mean, I think a lot of just, regular masculinity is misconstrued as being somehow toxic. So, I mean, to me, that's like a whole other conversation that I'm interested in. But just as a psychologist, I was living in New York, to answer your question about why I wrote this book about the mental health benefits of free speech. I was living in New York for about 20 years and had become pretty used to censoring a lot of what I thought in order to keep my business and media and academia relationships, the way they need to be to function in New York. And then we fled to COVID, or fled to Florida during COVID. And being in the free state of Florida, I started really having a lot more diverse conversations with people. And I realized I could express myself better and that it was good for my cognitive and emotional and social health. And so that's why I wrote the book about the mental health benefits of free speech.
Well, seeing as you're a psychologist, it's probably important that your mental health is in good order.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, also like 90% plus of my field leans left. And for reasons I don't fully understand, free speech is currently politically coded as being a right, red political issue. So therefore, there's no psychologists that are really talking about the mental health benefits of free speech. Psychologists are more talking about hate speech and bullying and toxic masculinity and, so I felt like almost as a public service announcement, I needed to express the other side of it, which is that, saying what we really think, what we really believe, and being able to hear other people say things we disagree with without, thinking our existence is being threatened, that all of that is actually important.
So has there been any political fallout per se from you having written this book that affected you personally?
Oh, totally. I mean, so for example, Dr. Phil endorsed the book, and I was scheduled to go on a podcast, and then they canceled me because they were like, well, look, if Dr. Phil likes you, obviously this isn't going to work. And I had people unsubscribe from my newsletter, again, ironically, because of Dr. Phil endorsing my book. and they said something about like I have a lot of social workers and psychologists in my list, and the social worker who canceled was like, because of section 6 of the worker ethics code, I need to cancel, you. And I wrote back a really nice note, and I was like, hey, can you please help me understand that? Like, what about section 6 is, am I breaking in the ethics code? I'd really truly like to understand. And they never ever, of course, wrote back. So, I mean, a lot of doors have closed, but a lot of other doors have opened. So, that's just the way it goes, I guess.
So much for tolerance, right?
Yeah. But I mean, there are some interesting things though, in the book when it does come to men and women and communication. When we were talking, before we jumped on here, I was thinking about there's a particular vignette, like a little story in the book about a woman, and she has kind of like a super feminist type boyfriend because she feels like that's the kind that she's like supposed to have,
Right.
but he's not really satisfying to her, but she can't
Go
admit
figure.
that. She can't admit that to herself. And so what she does then is she almost like unconsciously strikes up a flirtation with this really kind of very traditional masculine, almost like over the top, actually, guy who then, when he asks her out after she's, honestly been kind of fostering a flirtation with him for quite some time, she then gets really angry and says he's creepy and he's harassing her, right? So it's kind of an example of what can happen when we stifle our speech long enough. We start losing touch with what we even actually really think and what we even actually really want. When we're not authentic with other people and with ourselves, we basically go into denial. And that's when we start having interactions with people that can be very confusing for them. And I imagine your audience probably goes through that as men, where they're
Yeah.
talking to women. And on one level, consciously or unconsciously, the woman wants that man to flirt with her and come on to her. But on the other hand, it's like she doesn't, because of all the really weird messages that society sends to women as well, she can't really fully even admit to herself that she likes this, right? So she has to act to him and even maybe to herself like, oh, this guy's so creepy. I wish he'd leave me alone. But then at the same time, she doesn't actually want him to leave her alone. So I do feel like it sucks for men and for women.
That's really a refreshing take for a lot of these guys to have a woman come on and say, here's how some women are. They are still female. They still are heterosexual women. They like how masculinity turns them on, but they have such a twisted understanding of how that mechanism operates, the whole alchemy of it, that they feel like they have to reject it because of what the Yaya sisterhood told them they should think or what they should want, not what they're really feeling at an archetypal personal level. It reminds me of a situation years ago, Chloe, that I did an interview with a feminist outlet, and it was a very young, charming woman who interviewed me, and she and I got along great. And she said, "Off the record, Mr. McKay," I was like, "Please call me Scott. I'm not your dad. Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Sure." She goes, "Around here, around the newsroom, we're all feminists and we're all, like the future is female and men are toxic and patriarchy and stuff like this. But, I have a boyfriend, and in the bedroom, I just love to be subservient. I just love to get on my knees and give him a blowjob and have him dominate me and pull my hair in bed. Am I weird? Should I change that?" I said, "No, you're perfectly normal. That all happens, and it's actually kind of fun. And as long as he's not being abusive towards you, and it's happening in a lot of bedrooms out there." She goes, "Oh, thank you, Mr. McKay. I feel so much better now." That's what she said to me, and I'll never forget that conversation because I think it gets exactly to the heart, albeit at a very visceral level, of exactly what you're talking about. So here we are as guys walking on eggshells. Well, women, I mean, I guess heterosexuality doesn't even matter anymore because obviously women don't like men. They clearly don't like sex, even though we're basically put here on earth to procreate, right? And somehow men and women are at adversarial odds with each other, even though we were biologically even designed to be in partnership. And it's all so messed up, and yet people have been, and I'm going to go ahead and use the inflammatory term, brainwashed into believing this is how things are. But they haven't been that way for millennia. Yet, all of a sudden, in the last, I don't know, I guess since 1968, right? All of a sudden, men are terrible. They're responsible for everything that's ever happened that's bad in the universe. Toxic masculinity. And I do want to talk about that with you, by the way, because I want to hear your take on it. And everything that happened before, the women's movement basically was just patriarchal abuse, to women. Women have just been treated horribly over the years. And yet, men are told all the time in the media, culminating with that horrible Gillette commercial about 5 or 6 years ago, which most men thought was perfectly okay. And it's like, wow, you can't read between the lines on that one even. That's how far gone we are as men into, taking the wrong pill here. Men were told, do better. At the height of cancel culture, and I do believe, thankfully, it's waning a little bit. I think sanity is starting to come back into the general populace. I think we're sick of this. I think we were fooled once by COVID, and we're not going to be fooled twice about the whole stay away from each other thing in general. Men were told just to do better and stop being toxic. And we weren't told what that meant. Like, okay, masculinity is bad. We don't want to be abusive towards women. We don't want to beat people up. We don't want to kill and pillage villages and, blow cigar smoke at people and stuff like that. But do better is just basically a power play. Meanwhile, what have feminists done? They've taken virtuous masculinity, right? Leadership, providing and protecting, and they've garnered that for themselves to be the captains of industry and the leaders, and we're going to provide and protect for ourselves. I need a man like a fish needs a bicycle, that kind of thing. And it's left men going, well, what do we do? Stand back because the future is female and play cheerleader? And so you have a legion of men who are actually good guys. And, the linchpin of cancel culture, what is it? Label someone that they're afraid of being. Give someone a label that's the last thing they want to be labeled, and then they'll get into apologetic mode and kowtow to you. That's why everybody's a racist, everybody's a communist, depending on which side of the aisle you're leaning towards. Because no one wants to be a racist or a communist, so we'll do all the apologies, et cetera, to keep from doing that. So if we hate women or we're some kind of misogynist, most good-hearted men who actually like women will go, no, I'm not. Let me prove it to you. All right, well then, come to my feminist rallies, start, wearing the future is female pins everywhere and defer to us and let us lead. And then these guys are surprised when none of the women who ordered this upon them are sexually attracted to them.
Yeah, if I were a man, I would definitely not be trying to spend time around women that wanted to take me to a feminist rally or get me to where a future is female, pin. I mean, I think a lot of those phrases like men are pigs or the future is female or, frankly, even the idea of having like a women's affinity group at work, but you can't have a men's affinity group. I think a lot of that stuff, truly makes no sense. And again, if I were a man trying to talk to women, um, presumably I'm looking for enjoyable interactions with women, right?
And we should be able to expect that.
Yeah.
Naturally.
Well, you should, but I mean, we don't want to operate in life based on what quote should be, right? We want to face reality because we'll be more successful that way. We'll
I
get
got to
our
remember
own
I'm
goals
talking to
met.
someone in the mental health field, so fair enough.
You know, so I would pursue, interactions with women that even just have a look about them that has suggests that they conventionally embrace the idea of being a woman. However, that's not even a foolproof, way to go about it, obviously. I mean,
It isn't. No.
there's many women, that maybe look conventionally feminine, but they don't, respond that way.
And
Um,
vice versa.
Yeah, yeah,
I
for
know I
sure.
know tattooed purple-haired women who love men.
Right, well, you can still even have tattoos and purple hair, but look actually, feminine, right? Like
Well,
if that purple
sure.
hair is kinda like, groomed nicely and shiny, and those tattoos are on, sort of like a, you know, um toned body, or put together in a certain way. As a psychologist, we actually look at grooming, and grooming and the way a person dresses themselves, all as social signals. And so I would study those social signals. But one more interesting
I
thing
knew there was a
about
reason I shaved for you this morning and put the eye drops in, which is
yeah.
my soapbox.
Well, good. I brushed my teeth too.
Yeah. Great
But
teeth, by the way.
thank you.
Yeah.
So about the subject
They
of
look expensive.
oh, well, probably true, probably
Okay.
true. About the
Continue.
subject of toxic masculinity, when we think about, say, like, that usually gets lumped in with like machismo, right? I just
Sure.
thought, it might be interesting to know that there's a flip side to machismo, which almost never gets talked about, which is called Marianismo. So if we think of machismo as being kind of like the over the top, masculine behaviors to the point where it's like, um, out of whack and kind of destructive to the, women around them. Marianismo is when women are weaponizing their sense of victimhood, for example, to the point where it becomes manipulative and actually toxic as well. So I just thought it might be nice to throw that into the mix so that next time the subject of machismo gets brought up into conversations, I think it would be nice if people started bringing up Marianismo, which is the counterpart.
I've been at this practice for 20 years and have never heard that term before. And I've actually researched its existence, unbeknownst to you because you're a guest. But if these guys have listened to this show over the years, I have often noted that there doesn't seem to be a female equivalent to machismo.
It's called Marianismo. Now you know.
Now I know. The more I know, the better. So toxic. Are you equating Marianismo with toxic femininity?
You know, I mean, if we're going to use the word toxic, I mean, I don't like the word toxic, because really what that means is something, that's like radioactive and deadly, right? I mean, I guess, and I think also that it disregards the fact that there's subjectivity around these things, right? So one woman's toxic masculinity is another woman's mountain man, right? So I think toxic as well, it implies like a clinical threshold, or something where what we're really talking about is just personal preferences, right? So yeah, I mean, but if we would think of toxic masculinity as a valid term, which I'm not sure I do, then yeah, I would say Marianismo would be the counterpart of like a toxic femininity. But I prefer to think of these things, instead of toxic, as more just kind of too intense for me, or out of whack for me, or whatever. Because like I said, I think that there are some people that like it. There's a lid for every pot, right?
For sure. All right. Well, let me go ahead and maybe put some wheels on this car. This is something I think about every day. So I've thought it through pretty extensively. Machismo to me would encompass those things that we as dudes do to impress each other, not just tangentially related to the idea of masculinity as the catalyst of sexual attraction that ignites femininity. See, I have a apparently weird view. It makes perfect sense to me and the guys I coach, and it works. But I seem to be an outlier in thinking this, that the purpose of masculinity and femininity is to catalyze sexual attraction. Because you got male, you got female. That's how we make babies. And I consider masculinity and femininity the psychosocial components of sexuality.
I would agree with that.
It seems perfectly natural, right? Otherwise, what is sex reduced to? Body parts, and that's universally offensive to most women, right? If it's just about mixing body parts, it's like, ew, that feels so rough and so surfacey and
Well, also
superficial.
because what also masculinity and femininity include is also a little bit about personality traits. And so, as you said, on one level, masculinity and femininity is about, making babies, but it's also about raising them. So,
Yes.
you're
Well, yeah,
also,
all encompassing. Yeah.
yeah.
It's about
So,
what men and women are for on this planet, why we have heterosexuality, why there are two genders, why there are two sexes. All
yeah.
of that is
So,
masculine, feminine. Yeah.
I mean, as you said, part of it is about catalyzing like the sexual interaction, but it's also about screening for and attracting and looking for, a partner that's going to be able to say provide and protect, or,
The masculine,
nurture and, create, or, whatever it is.
the
So
feminine.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure.
Okay, so machismo would be those things we as guys do to impress each other. Build
Or
up
to
our hot
impress
rods.
women.
Well, and it may or may not work if it's merely
Yeah.
machismo as opposed to truly a masculine trait as women would define it and be turned on by it. So, for example, we go play golf and drink. We burp and we fart. We cut crude jokes with each other. Um, all of that is macho. The motorcycles, the guy stuff. The football games, et cetera, et cetera. That would all be considered macho. And some women would weaponize that against us, going, see, because you don't want to go shoe shopping with me, you're toxic, because you watch football. And I think that's an overreaction. But the problem is, it seems like feminism has insulated itself against any counterpunch or counterpoint, I guess would be the non-toxic masculine way to put it, right? By there not being a female equivalent. But we all know women do things because they're women that aren't necessarily going to be what attracts men to them, like going shoe shopping or having GNO on Friday night and all the girls are giggling till they snort, drinking apple martinis or chocolate teenies or something. We don't want any part of that. We don't want to go to the mall. We don't want to go shopping. Um, but for most men, it's okay that women do that. That Marianismo, or is that you know
No.
that
No.
that part that you talked about in terms of women weaponizing their femininity against men more about Marianismo?
Yeah.
Explain a little bit more.
So to answer that, I want to go back first to what you said about machismo. So you were like, "Oh, it's like, you know, burping and stuff like that." I don't view that as machismo. So to me, the macho, by the way, is just kind of like the normal healthy sort of side of like, masculinity, and then machismo is
Well,
like
see, a lot of us
when.
guys would think burping and farting is quite healthy
Well, I'm not saying it's
in
it's
private,
healthy
not
or
around the
not
women. No,
healthy. I'm just
no.
saying when I look at machismo or macho behaviors, I'm
Hmm.
talking about building things, paying for things, carrying things, doing things that directly relate to a masculine capacity to for of strength and output, right? And then when I think it crosses the threshold from being things that men are doing that are impressive or productive into like the machismo, kind of like negative space, when it no longer is about impressing or creating, but about controlling. So it's like, oh no, he's beating his wife, or he's locking down the bank account, to the point where she has to ask if she can buy a pack of gum or whatever.
Okay,
That's when
that's a
he's
little different than what I'm talking about. Your view,
exactly.
I'm going to acknowledge here, you and I are seeing this differently. Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
and now I can give you the female counterpart. So if the female in the positive side, like, so, just the giving and nurturing side of women, would be like, oh, I can put my needs aside to, take care of and support my partner or take care of the kids or whatever. But then it gets into the toxic side when she's no longer, again, doing it to, impress or support, but she's doing it to control and to be manipulative. So, you know, um, inventing tears or becoming the martyr, deriving a lot of power out of the victim role, those kinds of things. So again, I think that there's a healthy macho space and a healthy, feminine space. But then when they get it twisted, we get into the machismo and the marianismo sides.
All right. So you just said there's a healthy macho side before it gets into machismo.
Hmm.
Differentiate between macho and machismo
Yeah.
and feminine and marianismo, because I think that's where this
Yeah.
matrix you're drawing is.
Yeah. So the healthy macho side, again, is like building things, paying for things, carrying things, providing and protecting. It crosses, and that's when it's impressive and productive. It crosses into the negative side when it becomes just more about controlling. So instead of using his strength to build things and carry things, he's using his strength to smack around his wife. He's not providing and protecting, he's controlling and limiting. And then again, on the female side, the healthy feminine space is, I can put aside my needs to support my partner, to support my child. I can endure the pain of childbirth or whatever, because I want to, I don't mind some suffering to, it's just, it's part of a feminine role in some ways, is there's there's a sense of sacrifice and, being a helper, so to speak.
Well, I
But
think that
then
goes both ways, because I think if men are providing and protecting, they can't spend all the money on hookers and blow.
exactly, exactly,
Yeah.
but they're doing it in a leadership way, and then the toxic form is when they're not a leader, they're a tyrant, and then in the female sense, she's sacrificing in a helper, nurturer way, and then when it becomes toxic, it's when she's doing it in a manipulative martyr way.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's about being selfish versus giving in the context of a relationship, ultimately.
Mhm,
Yeah, I
mhm.
think that's fair. I think mostly you and I are on the same page. I think I have it divided into three tiers on the men's side. I have that masculinity, which attracts women, the things that men do to impress each other. And, we're not going to pretend, you know, burning rubber in our new car just to impress a woman is actually going to impress her, for example. Whereas, making her feel safe and comfortable in your presence really would turn her on. And then the toxicity is a layer above that where I'm perverting the virtue
Okay,
and
so
getting it
there's
backwards.
yeah, so what you're describing there too of like the burning rubber and stuff like that, I would call that masculine playfulness.
Right. Yeah. But I think colloquially, at least, people would say that's the macho stuff. Like this
Sure,
guy's going
sure.
into the gym and he's acting like a
Totally.
guy. But,
Totally.
a lot of the macho guys overlook that layer that I would say is actually more attractive to women, which is I am a provider and a protector. I am making women feel safe and comfortable in my presence. I can calm any situation. I can make the world safe for femininity to thrive in with my
Mhm.
leadership role.
No, you're right, you're right. There's a side of masculinity that is about attracting women, and there's a side of masculinity that's just about men spending time with other men. Yeah.
Right. I see it as like oil refinery. To get the gasoline, you got to get rid of the slag. And I think the slag is still going to be there, and it's probably the stuff men do with each other to hang out. But I
That
mean,
makes
that's
so
my own
much
interpretation.
sense. I
Okay,
agree.
good. So where did we get this wrong in terms of talking to each other? Why do men, as macho as we are, right, um, assume women are all going to be these Marianistic types who are going to play the victim role and send us to HR and call the cops on us simply for saying hello to them? Because I'll get these newspaper clippings from guys in the UK where an entire county in Britain has banned men from even talking to women, and it's a felony to do so. And they're like, see. So I mean, a lot of guys like to proof text this because they're getting angry at women for being angry at them, and it becomes a big, vortex of doom. Where can we practically start, Chloe, as men, if we have kind of found ourselves, even subconsciously sometimes, frankly, thinking it's not okay for me to be a man, first of all. It's especially not okay for me to be a heterosexual man who's interested, God forbid, sexually in a female human being. And third, practically speaking, what do I do about it? How can I start talking to women again? What say you?
Yeah, well, I think it's a very valid concern. I mean, and I say this as a clinical psychologist. I've sat with many women in private who share with me like it's their deep, dark secret, that they would just really like to be, a homemaker and have kids, and they're, kind of like high powered, New York, either executives or, up and coming, junior associates and stuff. And I think the thing about women is that, we're actually very high on agreeableness. And so if we're socialized to feel like what we're supposed to do is to do really well in school and really well in the workforce, and then we're also socialized and taught, well, men are toxic and boys are icky. And I talked to these like really well-meaning set of grandparents recently. They were like, really wonderful, people. And they were like, yeah, we're telling our granddaughter that she's not, they were playful, but they were like, she's not allowed to get married until she's 32. She's got to have her career first. And I'm like, oh, they mean well when they tell women to just, put boys on the back burner, um, until they're in their 30s, and then the women dutifully do that. But it really doesn't have a good result, because then of course the woman is all of a sudden 32 and dealing with, her biological clock. And but so anyway, back to what you said, I just
Yeah.
I think that women have been told, that men are toxic, to the point where men are correct in recognizing that a large swath of the women that they may try to approach, that those women are going to be unable or unwilling to receive that productively. And there's really nothing that men can do about that, unfortunately, except to learn how to discover it quickly so that you can move on to the next quickly. And you can do that just even simply by making eye contact and saying good morning to someone in a pleasant tone. And, if she, responds in any sort of a friendly way, well, great. Then you can build on that next time you see her in the coffee room. But if she looks at you and goes, good morning, you know what I mean? Like it's a strange thing that you said that. Just thank God that she made it super clear for you so that you don't have to waste any more time on that.
Right. You dodged a bullet there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I think that's good insight. I will add to it two things. First of all, I mean, this depends on your geography. I think if you're in the Bay Area or DC or New York, maybe it's 50-50, or there are more women who are, you know, not in a good frame of mind towards men. But, certainly where I live, I take guys out in field and it's 99-1, Chloe. Women are just very sweet and kind, and everybody really, regardless of all the rumors of hate and division on television, most people don't want to talk about politics anymore, and they really just want to live their lives, be happy, and get along with each other, black, white, gay, straight, etc.
Hmm.
And that includes men and women. And guys who come here and do infield with me, and if you guys have ever thought about that, go ahead and call me and talk about it. It might be the best investment you've ever made. What I do is I take guys out in field, guys just like you listening. And if you've ever had any problem talking to women, or you'd like to really get that handled in one 4-day stint with me, it's life changing, because what we do is we go out, Chloe, and we talk to 100 women. It's mentally exhausting. It's an extreme sport. And some of those conversations can last up to a half an hour once we get rolling. And guys are universally shocked at how sweet, kind, and adorable women are. And how if you approach with something that's fun and playful and brings out that spirit of enjoyment in women, they'll get right into the conversation with you and enjoy it. And the next thing I'm a happily married guy, and I still take guys out in field, and this is with my wife's blessing and everything. Sometimes she even goes out with us, but so I don't ever let it get sexual. But it's simply about being charming and letting women feel safe and comfortable with you. And when they feel that way, they like you. And guys will say, "My goodness, you could have asked her out." I said, "Yeah, I know, but I didn't, obviously, because I'm not available." But it's life changing for guys to see this, because women really aren't scary if we're not scaring them.
Yeah.
Most of us as guys don't want to be scary. We're not trying to scare anybody. We've just been fed this lie, frankly, that we're scary by virtue of being a heterosexual male. Riff away.
No, yeah, I'm so glad you shared that, and it sounds amazing. There's actually a psychologist. He passed away a few years ago, but he was one of the greats. His name was Dr. Albert Ellis, and he actually had a fear of speaking to women. And so what he did to get himself over it is what we would in psychology call exposure therapy. Is he sat, in Central Park and forced himself to ask, the next 100 women he saw for their phone number. And so he did that like all day long in Central Park, and it really just got him over it. He had another funny one too to get over social anxiety, which was to go on the subway and announce every stop. You know what I mean? Because like obviously, just put himself in awkward situations just to teach himself, that indeed he could handle it. So I would join you in encouraging anyone listening that feels like they just freeze around women. That Scott, you're offering to just spend a few days and move them through it. I mean, what would a guy have to lose, right? And as you said, it can be life changing. I think men
It
and
is.
women are meant to be together, and so if somebody feels like they just have a block, I would encourage them, to allow themselves to get past it. And I'm glad to hear what you're saying, that women everywhere are not shut down and nasty, because I do
Mm.
admit I've seen a lot of it, but it's
Well, in your line of
also
work, you might.
yeah, but I've seen a lot of women too that are truly just craving a guy. And I'm happily married myself, by the way. I just want to say
Doesn't
I've been
surprise me.
happily married, for 12 years. But I did write a book about dating as well, actually. It's called
Oh,
Dr. Chloe's 10 Commandments of Dating.
is it still
Um,
available?
yeah, yeah, it actually is.
Oh, well,
It's
let's
on
put that on the
Amazon.
Amazon influencer queue right
Yeah,
next to Can I Say That? Yeah,
yeah,
guys,
for
get both of
sure.
those books. Yeah. And
Yeah. So, and I have one more book too, which is called Nervous Energy: Harness the Power of Your Anxiety. And it kind of fits with what you're doing, because the premise of that book is that the healthy function of anxiety is to stimulate preparation behaviors. And it unpacks ways to do that. But so if somebody were anxious about meeting and talking to women, the preparation behavior is to go get some guidance, get some coaching, and like, do something about it. So I love what you're doing.
well, I mean, I already know I want to have you back on the show to discuss that book because that's a fantastic topic. And we're always looking for unique ones around here. So, what would you tell guys if they're struggling right now with even interacting with women because this paralyzing fear that something bad is going to happen as a result? What are the first action steps, practically speaking, for
Yeah,
those
well,
guys?
I think it's a really important rubric to look at there. So to first of all ask yourself, do I have this fear because of a genuine, actual pattern of experiences? And if you do, make a list of what those experiences are so that you can look at them and understand, what went wrong there. Were you barking up the wrong tree repeatedly and not seeing the signals? Were
Hmm.
you, going about things in a way that didn't make sense? Understand what happened. Or do you actually have no history of this, but it's kind of an irrational fear? Because the way that you respond to that, scenario that you described, Scott, is going to vary depending on the context around it. So the first thing we want to do is appraise the actual situation, and then that will shape the best way to move forward.
I think that is fantastic and dead accurate insight. Because I'll have guys who come to me and go, I can't get any women to go out with me. Well, how many women have you asked out? None. So there's no practical basis for their fear and loathing. They just have made this assumption women don't want to talk to them, that I'll get rejected, or that I'm bothering women. It used to be men were afraid of rejection. Nowadays, that's morphed into I'm afraid I'm bothering women with my presence. And yet they haven't even put it to the test. And I always tell guys, if you talk to 5 or 10 women and they're attractive to you and they're the kind of women you would like to go out with theoretically, and you have a good experience with that, you may be cured forever simply because you finally went out and, jumped into the pool. And yet, I do have guys who come to me and go, I can't even get within 10 feet of any woman with her angrily waving me off and saying, get out of here. Well, then we have a creepiness problem. then there's some self-work that we indeed need to do. But it's good to be able to accurately get a handle on what's going on there before we go around prescribing what the solution's going to be. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
absolutely. Well, I'm glad you're out there for guys, Scott. I can tell you obviously are going about that in a thoughtful way. So, yeah, I'd love to come and chat again sometime.
Yeah, and this has been a wonderful conversation. I feel like we could have talked about this subject for hours, but that'll just make guys want to dive into your book a little bit more, which is again called Can I Say That? Why Free Speech Matters and How to Use It Fearlessly. And we'll put it up there with your other two books at mountaintoppodcast.com/Amazon. And if you guys are listening to this show within a few days of its release, certainly within the first week of its release, that'll be right there at the top of my Amazon queue. Well, Dr. Chloe Carmichael, what a revelation and a joy to meet you. You're very charming, and I think you're right on target with all of this stuff. And it's just been a fantastic show that went in a few ways, especially with Mary and Ismo, that I think are very good insights and bring a lot of value. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. It was a real pleasure. And I look forward to the next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, listen, if you want to go out and field with me and talk to women, you want to do that, talk to me. Scott at mountaintoppodcast.com. And I do about 7 or 8 of them a year because they are exhausting. But you might be one of those guys. And if you're already thinking you are, and you're a man of means somewhat, so that you can take me off the grid for 4 days, call me or email me and let's talk about it. I would love to hear from you. And also, guys, there are lots of other resources there for you. If you have this issue, The Man's Approach is a great program. I have a little audio called Yes And, which you can get right off the mountaintoppodcast.com site that teaches you how to use the first rule of improv to really make wonderful conversations with women and most anybody, really. And that's available for you at mountaintoppodcast.com. While you're there, visit Jocko Willink's company, Origin in Maine. Guys, they have a whole new line of fall wear, winter wear. And what I love about Jocko's jeans is you may never get into a bar fight or a tussle or do these machismo things that we've been railing about all the time on this show today. But boy, you feel like you could while you're in your jeans. You feel like, you could stretch and do athletic things in these jeans. I got Jocko Willink's bison leather boots, and they're just fantastic. And they're just masculine, and they're certainly not Mary and Ismo, and you can wear them anywhere. I guess I wouldn't wear them to play pickleball, but when you're out and about, they're a very masculine look. You can get 10% off anything you get from Origin in Maine by using the coupon code Mountain10, as you can when you go to my friends at herosoap.com or thekeyport.com. Use the coupon code Mountain10 with them as well. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X and Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.